Hey guys, welcome to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So today we're back with the patch 6.1b rundown. So I know that this is a couple of days late, and previously, prior to this video, I've always done the patch notes breakdown within the first 24 hours of the patch being released, because I kind of feel that if you break down a patch like 3 days later, like what's really the point, right? There's so much other content out there that already covers it, and you guys probably would have watched another content creator already. But for this particular patch, because I do think this is despite being a minor patch like the B patch, I do think that this is a very major patch in the sense that there are a ton of changes. A lot of what I like to call mini reworks are coming in this patch, as well as a lot of changes to items. So I do think it's really important that we cover this patch. So hopefully you guys will still enjoy it. So first off, we're having a new event, Black Market Mayhem. At this time, the event is already out. Basically, you can get skins for a discount, and everyone gets the same skin. So if you want one of those skins, then it's going to be very beneficial for you. But with that out the way, now let's move on to the champion changes where it's really at. So Garen is the first champion getting a mini rework. So first off, they are removing the 70% damage reduction within 1 second on his W, right? Because although I think that this is a very OP spell, like I've one-tricked Garen at one point in time when I was learning top lane, I think this spell is insanely OP. 70% damage reduction is like an Alistar ultimate, right? But it's only 1 second, right? So, but the issue with this is that it's very hard to it's not very visual, right? In the sense that it's the Garen player and against the Garen, you can definitely feel the damage reduction, right? But it's not very obvious. So what they're instead doing is they're giving him a passive to gain 10% bonus armor and magic resistance, which is basically for free. That makes him a lot more tanky. And the new active, instead of giving him damage reduction, gives him a shield that decays over 2.5 seconds. So it does last quite some time, and it does absorb a decent amount of damage and scales off of bonus health. So with the shield, it's now a lot more visual. You can see the shield instead of damage reduction, which is not very visual. So I think this is just for better kind of clarity. And giving extra stats is also kind of insane. And obviously they want Garen to be built like a tank, not so much as a bruiser. So next up, his judgment. He's no longer going to crit when you hit people on the edge, but instead you now get more spins, scaling with your level and up to 11 spins. And you also get a cooldown reduction if you cancel the spell early. Furthermore, after you hit an enemy champion 6 times, it applies 20% armor shred for 4.5 seconds. So basically it's an inbuilt black cleaver, the old black cleaver where you could stack it up to 6 times. And you deal 20% damage to the nearest enemy. So the rework is only going to be live on May 29th, so not quite yet. But honestly, this seems like an insane rework for Garen. I already think he's like a top tier top laner at the moment, and I think this is gonna make him like the very best top laner in my opinion. We'll have to see when it comes out, but this does seem really insane. So next up is Jax. So Jax basically is just getting some very minor adjustments. So his leap strike can now be casted towards. Now in PC League, this has always been the case, but in Wild Rift, it never was. And I've played Jax maybe like only a couple of times, and there was once I tried to ward over the wall and jump, and then I realized I couldn't jump to the wall and I died. So now you can actually do that, and this is basically what Jax is supposed to have been all the time anyway, at least in my opinion, because that's what he was in PC. And on his Counter Strike, you can now dodge abilities with on-hit effects. Now, I didn't know you couldn't do that previously, but I guess this is basically just a buff to Jax, right? I mean, it's not really even a rework, it's just a straight up buff to 2 abilities, right? Next up, we have Sona. So Sona is getting a... I'm not going to call every single thing a mini rework, but honestly, a lot of these are not really number changes, but they're kind of like system changes, I guess, because like jumping towards is not a number change, but it's quite a big change. So for Sona's passive, this makes Sona a lot easier to play. Basically, your stun on your passive can now only proc when you're attacking champions or epic monsters, and it will not proc on minions, which is one of the biggest problems with Sona right now, which is that you really have to know how to play it properly and only proc it on champions instead of just wasting your stun on the minion, which a lot of Sona players do. Furthermore, much like a lot of other champions like Seraphine, for example, you will get full stacks of your passive when you respawn, which just makes sense, right? And then you also have but you now have a lower base damage on your Q, so it kind of balances out, I guess. But I think this change overall is positive for Sona. And then with Poppy, you are getting a little bit of increased damage onto jungle monsters with your Q, just to make her a better jungler, because she's being played mostly in the top lane at the moment. And with Set, He's getting extra base health regen. However, his health per level regen is going down. Also, he's going up. So he's just basically getting more health in general, right? Like throughout the entire game. And next up, his I believe this is his passive pit grit. Yep. So his passive is now getting extra damage. So instead of 7 times champion level, it's now 9 times champion level. So just a little bit more damage there. And the movement speed he gets from his Q is increasing by 5%. So overall minor buffs to all aspects of set, but of course they will come in handy. So Shen is now getting more damage to minions because his wave clear is kind of trash. So they are improving his wave clear quite a bit. This will make Shen quite a lot better because being able to clear the wave and then ult is going to be so much better compared to if you just ult and then the enemy top laner starts attacking your tower, things like that. Right, so Xin Zhao also getting a buff. His E base damage is going up by 5. Honestly, this 5 damage is quite negligible, but the attack speed increase is where it's really at. It's getting 5% extra attack speed, which in my opinion is the bigger buff out of these two, which is that basically after you dash on top of someone and you get the extra attack speed, you can basically just auto them down, proc your Q faster, you know, things like that, right? So just gonna make Xin Zhao better. I think Xin Zhao is already in a decent spot, so this is only gonna make him even better. So now with Evelynn, right? So Evelynn has not really been in the meta for like a year now or so, ever since she got nerfed to the ground. I mean, Evelynn is an assassin, right? So she's either really strong or really weak most of the time. So her Q AP ratio is going up by 10%. That's a pretty huge buff. And the ulti, which is, she's of course a very ult-reliant champion, going down by 5 seconds in all ranks. And I think this is actually a really decent buff because you don't want to lower the ulti cooldown by too much and make her OP. At the same time, she does need a little bit of a buff, right? So this kind of makes sense. And the 10% AP on her bread and butter ability, I think will make her a lot better. And I think we should be seeing some Evelynn now, which, yeah. So now Vex also getting a change. So first up is her passive. So now she's getting a similar kind of buff to Set, where it's now 10 times champion level instead of 8, and then extra 5% AP ratio as well. I think Vex is kind of a very niche counter pick, right? You don't want to pick her every match for the most part. So it's sort of like she's going to be better in the situation she's good in, and otherwise she's just kind of there, right? And then her Mistral Bolt, her Q getting a 1 second cooldown decrease, and this is her most spammable spell, so I think in this case the 1 second cooldown does help quite a bit. So Alistar apparently has been struggling when he's facing range support champions, but that will always be the case, right? Because Alistar is a champion that is full committal, like has to engage all the way on top of an enemy, so he's always going to struggle against ranged champions whatever you do to him, unless you give him a huge buff to his passive healing. So his base health is going up by 30, and his Q cooldown, the pulverize, the knockup is going down by about 1 plus second, 1.5 seconds at all ranks, right? So just lower cooldown on his main engage tool, but of course this is normally used in conjunction with his W, so of course this is going to be useful, but it doesn't really solve this problem that they're talking about, right? But overall still a nice buff to Alistar. So now we get to the Wind Brothers. So first off, you're no longer getting crit damage reduced by 10%, right? That's huge, right? Because that was the main kind of thing that's balancing Yasuo and Yone, which is that they get double the crit rate, but they get like less crit damage, like by 10%, right? But now that's being removed, and even bigger than that is every 1% excess crit converted to bonus AD, which they added like at a certain patch like way back when. Now instead of 0.4 AD is now 0.6. So now if you get like 3 crit items, for example, you are going to benefit from the extra crit even more. Of course, this 0.6 conversion is still not great, but for example, if you want to go for something like Charge Blade and BT and then into like either IE or Mole Reminder, this is gonna of course make it way better. And then next up you have his Q getting a extra 10% AD ratio, which is going to make him even better, and correspondingly with IE, you're going to get the same bonus. And then his Spirit Cleave, which is his W, is getting a slight nerf in the early part, slight nerf everywhere by 1%. I think this nerf is minor when you think about the buffs that he's gotten, so I think they're supposed to compensate a little bit, but the buff on his Q is huge, the buff on his passive is huge, so Yone is going to be even better now, and again, it's another champion that I think is already in a very good spot. Yasuo is pretty much getting a similar treatment. So first off, he's getting a little bit lower base stats, lower base AD, sorry, and higher base health and health per level, so they want to kind of remove tank Yasuo from the meta, which is kind of why they're lowering his base AD, because obviously any like carry champion that builds tank relies on their base stats. So for example, your tank Varus, which I wouldn't say has been popular, but has been a thing. And also like basically any kind of carry champion that builds tank relies on their base AD a lot. So hitting the base AD is gonna hurt tank Yasuo a lot. Of course, it'll still hurt normal AD Yasuo, but it's gonna hurt less than the tank build, right? So Yasuo's also getting the removal of the crit damage penalty and is getting the same buff as Yone, but this one is actually a pretty sizable nerf. Excuse me. The shield duration is going down from 1.5 seconds to 1. So the Yasuo shield is, well, at least against ADCs, is really effective, right? Because it blocks like extra 1 or 2 auto attacks, and the fact that it lasts for 1.5 seconds is actually pretty long, right? So many a times this shield has been the difference between me killing the Yasuo and the Yasuo killing me. So 0.5 seconds on the shield, in my opinion, actually matters, right? So this is kind of a nerf that may not seem like very obviously bad, but I do think it's quite a sizable nerf. But in compensation, he is getting, you know, these bonuses, right? So his Q is getting nerfed in terms of base damage at the higher ranks by a little bit. The crit damage also getting nerfed by a little bit, and the damage with IE also getting nerfed by a little bit. So strangely enough, Yone is getting a buff to his Q, but Yasuo's getting a nerf to his Q. Of course, the base damage going down once again ties into tank Yasuo, because base damage on his auto attacks as well as his Q is how tank Yasuo functions. So once again, I think they're trying to knock tank Yasuo off. And of course, if you're playing damage Yasuo, just the fact that they gave you the reduce crit damage by 10% should compensate for this, and you should still deal a similar amount of damage in the grand scheme of things. So Gnar, I think, has been strong ever since release. I'm surprised he didn't get more nerfs prior to this, but now his bonus attack speed from his Rage Gene is now going down by like 20% at the max rank, and his hyper bonus damage of his third attack, so of course that's a 3-hit passive like Vayne, the max health you're dealing also is reduced. So yep, I do think mini Gnar is way too strong. Like, Gnar is a transformation champion where Mega should be the way stronger form, and the fact that in mini you're still doing so much damage is just not right, right? So now he is getting a nerf in that respect, so I think that does make a lot of sense. And then we have Nasus, who's been way too strong ever since the Ionian Boots buff, right? Because he buys that, he gets lower cooldown, he gets mana regen, and he stacks Q really, really easily. So he's now way too strong in the early game for someone who should be a late game champion. So what they're doing to him, lower base AD, increased base AD per level in compensation, because obviously they still want his late game to be similar, but they want his early game to be weaker. Magic resist going down a little bit as well, but I think base magic resist is not too important because mostly you're playing against AD in the top lane. Physical vamp that you're getting from your passive is slightly lower in the early game. Once again, they want his late game to be the same, but they want his early game to be weaker, and then his Q cooldown is going up just by 0.5 seconds, and the base damage is going down slightly as well. Now the 0.5 seconds is kind of in compensation for him always building Ionian Boots, right? So if we really think about it, this cooldown nerf shouldn't be too significant, but the base damage nerf will of course matter in terms of stacking minions, right? So overall, they're just trying to make him weaker in the early game, but his late game should still be the same. I think this does make a lot of sense because Nasus is a mid to late game champion, and he should not be having a strong early game because that would just be unbalanced, which is why Nasus has been the top pick in the top lane for ever since the Iron Boots buff. Similarly, the top pick for the jungle is Amumu. So Amumu is getting nerfs as well, and then what he is getting is a nerf to his cooldown on his Q by just a little bit, by 1 second, as well as the base damage going down by 10 at all ranks. So once again, of course, this is his bread and butter engage, similarly to the ulti, which is also getting a 10-second extra cooldown. So hitting his two main abilities that make him very strong. Didn't really hit his tankiness though, but this should knock him down a peg. So we go from basically the best top laner to the best jungler, and now to the best mid laner. Rise, of course, has been dominating ever since he came out. Does way too much burst in the mid to late game. Base health is now getting hit by 30, so it will make his laning phase quite a bit weaker. The overload, which is his Q, I believe, the damage is going down in terms of the base amount by 10, and the AP ratio is going down by 5%. And the spell flux, which I believe is his E, I'm not really sure, to be honest, but it's also getting hit in terms of the cooldown. Wait, cooldown? This should be damage, right? I think this is an error, right? You don't have a 200-second cooldown. So I think this is damage. So damage is going down in terms of both AP ratio as well as base amounts. Now, I think this seems like quite a sizable nerf because he got hit in both ratios and base damages as well, and base stats as well, right? So this should make him weaker, but I do believe he should still be strong because his numbers are so broken on release, right? I think even kicking him down a peg like this, I think he should be strong. So now Jarvan and Vi, the two engaged junglers, two main engaged junglers, are both getting a buff, right? So Jarvan, we'll get to Vi later on, but Jarvan bonus attack speed from his E is actually going up by 5%. That's huge. Base damage is going up by 5. That barely matters. And the cooldown on his ulti is going down by 5 seconds. Now, of course, the ulti and I mean, honestly, Jarvan's entire kit, other than the W, is all just very important, right? So getting more attack speed from his E, great. Getting lower cooldown on his ult, great. Should make Jarvan even better. And I think he's also in a decent spot already. So Olaf is a champion. I don't think he's in a decent spot. I think he's quite weak in both the top lane as well as the jungle. So they're actually giving him more base damage on his Q. So especially when you max Q, you're gonna benefit quite a bit. And the damage ratio to monsters on his E is going up, so he's gonna clear faster. So it should benefit quite a bit in both top and mid lane. Then we get to Vi, right? So Vi is getting a buff to her passive damage. That's the 3-hit passive, which is going to deal even more damage. And her Q base damage is going up by 10 at all ranks. So basically, more damage on Q, more damage on the passive. I honestly think Vi is one of the best junglers. I don't think she needed a buff, right? Like, she's apparently not performing to expectations in the early game. Really, like the Vi's I've been playing against have been doing insane in the early and mid games, but maybe in general people are not, so therefore they're giving her a buff. But I think Vi is going to be one of the top junglers, especially with Amumu getting nerfed as well, right? Of course, we're going to do a tier list sooner or later. And now we take a look at items. So firstly, Battle Fantasy is getting buffed with extra 5 AP as well as extra 5 base damage on the passive. I think that a lot of people are still going for Ludens instead of Battle Fantasy, so they kind of want to make it a little bit more attractive, and these are minor buffs, but they do of course matter. Now Malignant's price is going down by 100 and the AP is going up by 5. Once again, I still think that Malignance is only going to be built by people who want Malignance, and it shouldn't be built on any just random champions. So in the end, it's really just a buff to the champions who want to build Malignance. Now we get to the support items, right? So basically, support items have all kind of basically mostly been nerfed, right? So firstly, Redemption is really more of a tank support item and not really a healing and shielding kind of item, right? So they're giving it 50 more health, but they're removing the extra heal and shield ratio, the 5%, so it now has nothing, right? And the healing value is now going down from base amount from 50 to 40, and now it's getting better off of both and stuff. So once again, funnily enough, this has always been more of a engager kind of item because it's basically letting the engager kind of heal his team or her team. But the funny thing is, Redemption is actually still good on Enchanters just because you can proc your like Ardent and your Flowing Water on like a lot of people on your team at the same time. So I still think this could be a last item option for Enchanters regardless of these changes, but it's really more of a tank engager option. And I can't think Redemption is in a really weird spot in the meta right now because it's kind of just an okay item, but there are always just better options for both tanks as well as Enchanters. So yeah. So next up, we look at the enchanter items, right? So Harmonic Echo has been giving too much healing, so it's getting 8% heal and shield ratio cut, as well as now instead of healing extra when someone's at 40% health, it's now 30%. Now this is a very, very sizable nerf, but Harmonic Echo has been really, really strong, right? You have so many champions like Nami, or basically a lot of healing and shielding supports like that can heal, right? Like Yumi, all rushing this item first, and then the healing they give when someone's below 40% health is just so insane, right? It's bigger than like Summoner heal, right? So that's kind of unfair. So I do get the nerf, but it's definitely a hit to heal and shield supports. And most of the support item changes are all targeted at that, right? Because after the Lucidity Boots change where it gave base mana regen, every enchanter is building it, and then enchanters have become really, really strong in the meta. So basically all enchanter items are getting hit. So price of Flowing Water is going up by 100, ability haste is going down by 10, heal and shield ratio is going down by 2%. It's like just a nerf all across the board, and now healing and shielding someone gives less ability haste. So basically it's just a nerf to every aspect of Flowing Water. Now honestly, I get it, right? Enchanters are way too strong. So you hit Harmonic Echo, you hit Flowing Water, you hit where's Iron Sensor right here. Iron Sensor getting the same treatment. So yeah, Makes sense, right? Makes sense, because our enchanters are too strong right now, so I can see why they nerfed all of these. So then we have like triple A ARAM, just getting some changes here. I'm not too concerned about it. And then you have a couple new skins coming out, and that's basically it. So thank you guys so much for watching this video, and see you guys on the next video tomorrow, and goodbye.